Thank you so much for coming out on this beautiful afternoon. We're so glad to be here to play for you. Brasstown Ringers began 30 years ago at the John C. Campbell Folk School in Brasstown, North Carolina, under the direction of Pat Meineke. Pat has since moved, and Linda took over as our director, Linda Starrett, in 2019. When we started, we had 3 octaves of Schulmerich bells, and we have since expanded to 6 octaves of bells. You know, the bells are kind of like coat hangers. They multiply when you're not looking, and that's what happened to us. We have 6 octaves of bells and 6 octaves of choir chimes. 12 bells per octave, that means we have about 150 bells here today. And like so much else in life, real estate is a problem. So this is my function today. I'm serving as a person who stalls for time to give everybody a chance to get their bells ready to play for you. We opened with African Alleluia, arranged by Kathy Mockelbust, and featuring Steve Holcomb on percussion. Our next piece was written in 1929 by Albert Brumley, and has since been recorded by just about everybody. According to Mr. Brumley, the words came to him as he was picking cotton on his family's farm in Oklahoma. Now think about what was happening in 1929 in Oklahoma, how hot it was, how dry and dusty, and what a job it is to pick cotton. And you might agree with his sentiment. Arranged here by Tammy Waldrop, this is I'll Fly Away. Today's first quiz question, what was the other hymn that you heard in there? You heard it? Sweet By and By, yeah. Well, last Friday night we had kind of an exciting concert. It was the first concert in our 30-year history that we ever played without power. We were down in LJ, and you remember there were some bad storms last Friday, and we were about 2/3 of the way through the concert, the power came back on, but it went really well. We were surprised. Afterwards, a man came up to me and he said, how did all of this get started? Whoever had the idea of a bell choir? I mean, this is kind of like a musical team sport, but there's no indication of what started. And basically what we're telling him is that a handbell started life many years ago as a bell in the tower of a cathedral in a medieval village. And as that tower bell, it served not only as a summons to services, but an alarm clock, it's time to get up, a kitchen timer, the communal oven is hot, bring your bread dough and bake it, a fire alarm, somebody's barn is on fire, come put it out, or intruder alerts, we're under attack, get out here with your pitchfork. And then, of course, one tower bell turns into many tower bells, and in England in particular, the concept of change ringing arose. And if you're familiar with change ringing, it lasts a long time. It takes a lot of practice to get it right. And you can imagine that if you're living in a village with a church right in the middle of town, and there's a bunch of guys up in the church tower in the middle of the night practicing, and you want to go to sleep, you might find that a bit annoying. So that's when handbells were developed, because that enabled the people to practice the changes in some place warm, someplace dry, someplace where maybe there was a libation available, like the village pub. And from there, handbell choirs developed, and here we are. Our next piece was written as a memorial by Arnold Sherman, a Texas-based composer and editor of handbell music. In this piece, he describes the final illness, death, and ascent to heaven of a beloved handbell ringer named Norma Taubert Brown. We'd like to dedicate this piece to the people we've lost during the past 2 years. This is Grazioso. My other function is getting in the way. I do that really well. William Bradbury composed the tune of our next piece. He came from Maine, but moved to Boston in the early 1800s, and he began a career focused on music, including some time spent in Germany studying harmony and composition. The words were written by Joseph Gilmore, a person you wouldn't think of as likely to be a poet. He was a railroad superintendent in New Hampshire and Vermont. He later became governor of New Hampshire. In this arrangement by Tammy Waldrop, Steve once again provides percussion to help us keep the beat. This is Calypso on He Leadeth Me. We had a guest percussionist. George James has joined us. He's a former member, and he's come down from Franklin to help us out. And we appreciate him being here. Our next piece is based on an American folk melody that has roots in northern England and Scotland. The tune of the piece is the hymn Land of Rest. A shape note version of this hymn appeared in the 1844 edition of the Sacred Harp Hymnal, so it's been on these shores for quite a while. The words of our version of the tune go like this: Jerusalem, my happy home, when shall I come to thee? When will my sorrows have an end? When will thy joys I see? Now you'll see some people in choir doing something that looks like they're stirring their bells. This is called the singing bell technique, and they mean to do that. We are directed by Jackie Reed in Jerusalem, my happy home. I read the other day that there's something like 2.5 million weddings scheduled for this season. This is a particularly joyous season for weddings because we've had to postpone them for so long. And for us, it's extra special because 2 of our members are getting married. So we were playing the wedding march in their honor. Felix Mendelssohn wrote this in 1842 as part of a suite of music to accompany Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. The first use in a wedding apparently came in 1847, but it wasn't until Queen Victoria's daughter, whose name was also Victoria, used it in her wedding in 1858 that it became as popular as it is today. Here is Mendelssohn's Wedding March.
Brasstown Ringers have 150 bells, as has been mentioned, but that's still not enough for us. We're grateful to the First Presbyterian Church and the First Methodist Church, both in Franklin, North Carolina, for the loan of their bells, which we are using for our small groups. We're also indebted to our ringer, Brett McDonald, for his work polishing all of our bells to keep them their shiny best. Speaking of small groups, in a few minutes it will be time to hear from our Brasstown Ringers Quartet. Bell choir directors usually miss out on all the fun of ringing handbells, plus they have to stand with their backs to the audience. Directors also deal with multiple personalities making up the typical bell choir. Some examples we've heard about from other choirs, of course, are players who always have better ideas than their director about dynamics or changes of tempo, or players who seem determined not to watch the director at all. So how do directors cope with what can be the frustration of directing instead of playing? Well, most handbell choir directors were first ringers, and they still love to ring. That's true for our director, Linda. So she put together a quartet that functions mostly without a director, the perfect solution for dealing with ring envy. The quartet is also a great place to put the player who wants to ring as many bells as possible, the player who wants to be a standout performer, and the player with exceptionally long arms. The quartet's first piece, Hornpipe from Water Music, arranged for handbells by Charles Maggs, was originally composed by Handel in 1717 at the request of King George I. The king wanted a large, spectacular occasion to impress his English subjects. His idea was to have a concert performed while he traveled down the Thames on a royal barge traveling from Whitehall Palace to Chelsea. On the day of the premiere performance, the king's barge was joined by a larger barge for about 50 musicians. It's said that on this night, the Thames was filled with boats and the banks were packed with Londoners waiting to listen to Handel's music. A la Hornpipe is perhaps the most famous movement of water music. And if Steve is done with the percussion, our quartet will now play. Quartet's second piece is the hymn tune, Blessed Assurance. The tune was composed by Phoebe Palmer Knapp. Knapp played the tune for the blind lyric writer Fanny Crosby, who during her lifetime wrote words for over 8,000 hymns, and asked her, "What does the melody say to you?" Crosby immediately replied, "Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine," and then recited the entire first stanza of the now famous hymn. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine, heir of salvation, purchase of God, born of his Spirit, washed in his blood. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. Blessed Assurance is rated as one of the 10 most popular hymns sung by United Methodists, and our quartet will play the tune as arranged by Karen Roth.
So every bell choir director faces the same dilemma. How are you going to maintain that full-size choir when life keeps happening? She said she turned it on. Yes, she did. Yeah. Life just seems to get in the way sometimes. One way to do that is to recruit and to ask college students, high school students to come and join your choir. Unfortunately, they grow up, they move away, and then you're stuck. Another way is to have small groups. And so that's what we have next. 2 pieces are going to be performed by our group of 6 ringers. It's the perfect way for someone to come to your church or club or whatever if you just need a small group and you don't need a lot of room, because they can just bring their bells and come perform for you. The first piece that they're going to play is How Beautiful. Now, How Beautiful is a song about familial love. And its message says we should be united in our service to each other and echo Christ's love in our daily lives. And this especially rings true today. It was released in 1990 by Twyla Paris, And the third verse is particularly special to our group because it's about a wedding. And that third verse goes, "How beautiful the radiant bride who waits for her groom with his light in her eyes." And this is how beautiful. So the second song that they're going to be playing tonight is called Rondo. And this was written by a French composer, Jean-Joseph Mouret, in 1729. It's hard to believe that those songs are still being played today. This first movement of the piece is very widely known, and again, it's often used at weddings. We've kind of got a theme going on, put a ring on it. I think you're going to recognize this tune, particularly if you watch PBS Masterpiece Theater. So they're going to perform for you Rondo.
Our next piece was inspired by a French novel, originally published in serial form in 1909. It was written by Pierre Leroux, who became a reporter after he gambled away all the money that was intended to train him to be a lawyer. He was fascinated by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Edgar Allan Poe and decided to try his hand at mystery novels. His inspiration was the Palais Garnier, where a fire on opening night melted through a wire and caused a chandelier to come crashing down on the audience. His book inspired 2 silent movies, the first one in German, now unfortunately lost, and the second one starring Lon Chaney. So I think you can see where we're going here, kind of gothic thriller stuff. In 1986, Andrew Lloyd Webber turned the story into a musical that is still running on Broadway today. Arranged by Douglas Wagner, here are tunes from Phantom of the Opera. In 1933, the folk musicologists John and Alan Lomax went to state prisons in Alabama and Louisiana and recorded the prisoners singing spiritual. At Angola in Louisiana, they found a prisoner named Leadbelly, who recorded this song in 1945 after he was released. The words tell of Christ's crucifixion, how he endured several indignities, being forced to carry his cross, being nailed to that cross, and stabbed without saying a word. There have been lots of other versions, including an arrangement for strings in the 1950s and a grunge version recorded by Nirvana. We'll be playing an arrangement by Arnold Sherman. This is He Never Said a Mumbling Word. In 1930s South Africa, a Zulu man named Solomon Linda worked menial jobs at a recording company in Johannesburg. The bigwigs there decided to let him record several songs, including one called Mbube, and I apologize for my Zulu. The first few takes weren't very impressive, but on the third take, Solly let loose, and he improvised this soaring melody that we all recognize today. In 1949, Alan Lomax brought the song to his friend Pete Seeger, who recorded it 2 years later. He called the song Wimue and listed its arranger as Paul Campbell, a name later revealed to be a pseudonym so he could claim royalties for it. Most of us are familiar with the version arranged by George David Weiss, Hugo Peretti, and Luigi Creatore, recorded by the Tokens in 1961. I read that and I said, no, it wasn't that long ago. I remember it, but it was. Yeah.
I remember it.
I remember it.
I think.
Of course you do. Backup singers repeated the word Wimue, which turns out to be a mispronunciation of Uyumbube, which is Zulu for you are a lion. Arranged for handbells by Tammy Waldrop and directed by Jackie Reed, here is The Lion Sleeps Tonight. I think we can accuse George of being one of those people who doesn't have to look at the director. Natalie Sleeth was an American composer of hymns and choral music. Born in 1930, she wrote our next piece in 1977 for the inauguration of her husband as president of West Virginia Wesleyan College. Although it's written in a minor key, the words are very upbeat. There will be joy in the morning on that day, for the daylight will dawn when the darkness is gone. There will be joy in the morning on that day. Arranged by Martha Lynn Thompson, this is Joy in the Morning. I'd like to take a moment to let the choir introduce themselves, and we'll start with the laugh track in the back.
What did I do? Oh.
See?
I'm Steve Holke from Berkeley, North Carolina, and I'm the priest at Grace Mountainside Church in Robbinston.
I'm George James. I live in Franklin, North Carolina, and I'm just glad to be playing with these folks again.
I'm Mark Schickadas from Franklin, North Carolina.
Jackie Reed from Hayesville. Sorry about that, Brett.
So we all come from a long way away to meet in Blairsville and practice together, and you can see that it takes a good bit of dedication. Our theme, as you noticed on the poster, is Put a Ring on It. On Friday night, we played in Clayton, Georgia, at a Methodist church where the pastor said, "You remember Beyonce?" And she said, "Put a ring on it. If you like it, put a ring on it." And he said, "If you like it, put a cha-ching on it." And you will find some offering plates at the back of the church, and we ask humbly for your help because we have a debt to repay. When our original director left for Washington State, for some reason she didn't want to take all this stuff with her. It had been in her dining room in Brasstown, but there just wasn't room for it on the moving van or in Washington State. So she very kindly offered to let us pay her as we could. We're almost there. We have about $3,000 left to make up the difference, and with your help, we'll get there this season. The second thing that I want to tell you about is that we have a mission not only to make music together, but to foster the development of handbell ringing in the area. We're always open to new members and hope that you'll come up after the concert to let us know if you're interested, and also if you just have any questions about what exactly we're doing up here, we'd be glad to answer those for you. The third thing I want to ask from you is that we have lost our home. We had a practice space in Blairsville that is no longer available to us, and we are currently homeless. Any of you knows of a secured space somewhere between Brasstown and Blairsville, please let us know. In the summer of 1893, Catherine Lee Bates took a break from teaching English at Colorado College to climb Pikes Peak. When she got to the top, she was exhausted, but absolutely blown away by the view. The words of our next piece came to her on her downward journey. The words seemed just right for a song, and for years, people sang it to any tune they could think of, most often old Lang Syne. In 1926, a federation of music clubs held a contest to find a tune that was appropriate for the words, and the winner was a hymn written in 1882 by Samuel Ward. Now, I don't know about you, but I've kind of cut back on my news consumption because it seems like it's all bad, and we're not doing anything right, and there's nothing right in the country, and it's just no good. So I don't want to listen to it anymore, because you and I both know that we are blessed and fortunate to live in the best place in the world. So we leave you with America the Beautiful.